I'm Matt Cortman, along with my wife Lauren. We're the Louisiana Wilds. We're an informal nature group. Our goal is to engage people in nature. So we're thrilled to be starting these Zooms to lead off with Dr. Charles Allen. So what we'll do is we'll go through. I will have a brief introduction to who we are and future programs, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. Allen. If you have questions that are clarifying questions, like you don't understand a term or something, go ahead and put that in the chat and we can talk about it immediately. But other than that, we'll ask you to keep your questions till the end. Again, the goal tonight is really to have fun and to celebrate Dr. Allen's amazing contribution to the natural history study in Louisiana. I see so many people here whom I know who've learned immensely from Dr. Allen. So with that, we'll get on to our slideshow. So again, this will just be a brief introduction to us. So the topic of tonight's Zoom is Dr. Charles Allen, Louisiana natural treasure. We're the Louisiana Wilds. We're broadly a cultural group that's mostly focused on the wild things of Louisiana. The emblem is, we picked that because we want to appeal to that thing which makes you want to howl at the moon. So really, we're just so thrilled and honored to have Dr. Allen with us here tonight because I literally can think of no one who combines those qualities better than Dr. Allen. His knowledge and, more important, frankly, his infectious enthusiasm is what appeals to so many of us. So with that, we're the Louisiana Wilds, and that's also a pun. We, with the people we want to attract, are nonconformists. So contact us anytime about anything to do with outdoors in Louisiana. Mostly our research has been on the ivory-billed woodpecker. We do that year-round and been all around the state. We've done aerial surveys, and that's through our program called Mission Ivory Bill. We've had about 50 Zoom meetings all around the state for ivory bill education, and mostly the ivory bill's in the news because of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service proposed to declare the ivory bill extinct and remove it from Endangered Species Act protection. So we've been very involved with that and leading the fight against that. And just my background is I'm a former Louisiana Ornithological Society president. From the same town as my mentor and one of my heroes, Dr. George Lowry on the left. So I got interested in the ivory bill when I was 8, and Dr. Lowry invited me into the LSU Museum of Natural Science to let me hold 2 ivory bill specimens. So I've really been lucky in that, and that's a lot of what Lauren and I want to do is get young people interested in the glory of the outdoors. So just briefly on the ivory bill, and we're not going to spend much time on the ivory bill, but again, United States Fish and Wildlife Service announced their proposal to declare the bird extinct and remove it from Endangered Species Act protection almost 2 years ago now. And so what we had hoped, we've searched all year round, but frankly, I've had to be the ex-lawyer in me to be involved with this. But the great thing here in Louisiana is relations and relationships. So we really focused on that to get our ivory bill work done. But we're here tonight for Charles Allen. There he is with his lovely wife, Susan. And anybody who has an ivory bill in the hand is always impressive to me. That's one of these carvings. Another I have to Dr. Allen is my mother. We spread her ashes in the land that's now the Charles Allen Washita River Nature Preserve. Visit the parish of Caldwell, and we'll have some field trips there. But at any rate, this was land that was owned by Dr. Harry Winters, and he donated the land. Ultimately, it's now in the hands of the parish of Caldwell. So check that out. But Dr. Caldwell Parish. So Dr. Allen, here he is in his native element. If you haven't had the chance to learn from Dr. Allen, I highly, highly recommend it. The center part, I always get nervous when I'm in the field with Dr. Allen. Frankly, I'll be wearing snake boots and he'll be wearing tennis shoes, and he doesn't wear a raincoat. The center one was pouring down rain. He's such a marvel. But anyway, on the left, you'll see that it's always a hands-on experience. And on the right, he can tell you almost anything you want to know about the plant. Many of you know Dr. Allen in, I don't want to say retirement. He was a longtime college professor, but he and his wife Susan have Allen Acres in Vernon Parish. And in the course of their work, Dr. Allen has become quite the expert on moths. And here I was bleary-eyed going with Dr. Allen to check some of his moth traps. He can describe that. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So Dr. Allen, again, as I mentioned, his knowledge is incredible. Here's just some of the books he's written, and I'm sure he'll tell you how to purchase those. But please support his work. He really is a Louisiana natural treasure, and he follows. We'll be doing some biographies on E.A. McElhenney and Caroline Dorman, and again, my mentor, Dr. George Lowry, and Dr. Allen falls right into that line. So visit them at Allen Acres, B&B. Lauren and I have stayed there a few times. It's always a real hoot. I think the last time I was there, Dr. Allen and I watched the LSU-Florida game where the Florida defensive back threw the shoe, and miraculously the Tigers won. So we really encourage you to visit Allen Acres, bnb.com. And with that, yeah, classes. I'll let Dr. Allen tell you more about that, but you can't go wrong with that. So with that, Dr. Allen, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, no, thanks, Matt and Lauren. It's really a pleasure, and it's really going to be a pleasure tonight. I've seen some names pop up and haven't seen in years, and it's going to be great to be talking to people that I know, and I feel like I'm really talking to people that I know. I'm also very excited tonight. I put on blue jeans this afternoon for the first time since June. I've been having a foot problem. It was all bandaged up and it wouldn't fit through the narrow ends of blue jeans. So I've been wearing pajamas everywhere I went for since June. So this is a great night for me. I'm feeling great that I'm back in blue jeans. They are kind of wide at the bottom, though, I've got to admit, to get over my injured foot. It's kind of interesting. I was born in a small community called Sheridan community, about 3 miles northeast of Greensburg, Louisiana. And every time I went to LSU in the 60s, people would say, "Oh, Greensburg, that's in Mississippi." And I had not heard that. But just in the last few days, we had a visitor here, and somehow it came up where I was from. When I mentioned Greensburg, that same person said, "Oh, that's in Mississippi, but those are Greenwood and Greenville." But Greensburg, Louisiana is a very small town in a parish called St. Helena, very small one. No railroads, no red lights in that parish at all. Another very interesting thing, my middle name is McKinley, and I made an assumption early in life that I was named for a great uncle on my mother's side of the family. And all of you, if you're doing genealogy, you should take note of this. Sometime in the 80s, my second daughter, Tanya, and I went to my mother and sat down and started asking questions. And one of them, I said, "Oh, I just assume I'm named for McKinley Bridges." She said, "No," real loud, "you're named for a McKinley Carter on your father's side of the family, and he actually died during World War I. So you really learn. So be careful that you make an assumption anytime in life." So that's those two things there. Let's see. Yeah. I was born April 12th, 1945. And some of you, and I know Matt already knows this, he's told me, so all you others out there, think about what happened on April 12th, 1945. There's a hint there, Warm Springs, Georgia. Actually, the answer is, that's FDR. That is the day Franklin D. Roosevelt died on April 12th, 1945. So that's very interesting aspect, and not many people would know that, but Matt knew it. The earliest picture of me is on the left. This was when I was 6 years old at Greensburg, and Greensburg was one of those schools that had all the way from no kindergarten, all the way from first grade to 12th grade, and there I am about 6 years old, and on the right is what I look like today. So quite a change, but I was very excited to go to Greensburg Elementary, then the middle school, and then all the way to high school back in the day. All 12 grades were there. And I used to tell, and some of those out there that may have had ecology with me in Monroe, I would tell them they had to use the scissors because I did not have kindergarten, so I didn't know how to use scissors in a joke. But anyway, I grew up on a dairy type, a small dairy, very small dairy. We had fields, and we were not far from the Tickfaw River. We could actually go there, continue, but this is upstream, not the Tickfaw River. That's much larger for the downstream. It was probably I'm living right now very close to the Whiskey-Cheetah. They're about the same size as far as the Tickfaw River, but it was wonderful. We went swimming all during the summer. We had 3 swimming holes. We had one that was sandy dandy, so pretty sandy bottom, pretty kind of shallow. We had one rocky bottom, and it had lots of rocks in it. And then we had deep blue that when we got older, we went there because it was deeper. And of course, like I said, Greensburg School was all the way from 1 to 12. I was in FFA, 4-H, football, basketball. Everybody was just pretty much everything because it was just so small. I'll be saying in a moment that when I graduated from high school, it was only 19 in the graduating class. One of the things that was really important, the only time that I really got out of Louisiana, maybe went into Mississippi a little because Greensburg's so close to Mississippi, but the only time that I really left Louisiana was in 1961. We won the FFA Dairy Cattle Judging Contest, and we got to go to Waterloo, Iowa. The sponsor there on the right, the left, right, whatever, is the guy that drove us all the way there. And not only that, he took us all the way on to Chicago and on to Michigan, and I actually walked into Canada. That was probably I know the first one in my family, first one in a lot of people in the Greensburg area that had ever been to Canada. But anyway, the guy just to my left, Jimmy Vornado, ended up being the valedictorian of the graduating class, and he's a medical doctor now in Greensburg. The Willard Easley, the other guy, is an engineer in Baton Rouge, but I think he may have retired from work. But anyway, I graduated in 1963, like I say, with 19 graduates and a salutatorian in the class, and not difficult to do when there are only 19 people. So I started at LSU in forestry, and I got a BS in May of 1967. So that was kind of just ad lib. I went to classes. I learned a lot about trees, and my favorite class was dendrology, learning how to identify trees. So in 1967, Vietnam was really active, and I was reclassified from 4A to 1A, so I realized I was going to be drafted. So I went to the Army and bargained and got a sign up in being into electronics. So I spent 9 months in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, learning all about electronics. Of course, it doesn't show today because I have to call on Dawn, my daughter, to fix the computer. But I learned a lot about computers and other electronic things there in Fort Monmouth. Fort Monmouth is one of those Army bases that's no longer existent. They closed it, but it was really, I should back up. I took basic training here at Fort Polk, where I am right now, too. So Fort Polk, and then to Fort Monmouth, spent 9 months. Then I spent the rest of my Army career in Vietnam, but I was in the Signal Corps. Our motto was, and I hope there are no veterans out there that get offended by this, but we won't fight and you can't make us. So anyway, that was the Signal Corps, whatever. But I spent almost the whole time inside air-conditioned buildings because the signal business had to be air-conditioned. So in Saigon, most of the time, or a couple of other luxury places in Vietnam. So 68 to 7. Summoned in the Army. But the best thing that happened, I met Susan, you see there in the background, and we got married on March 31st, 1970. So those of you that are quick with math realize we've been married for 53 years. So anyway, that's, and the friend there in front of us, Jerry and Jackie, they went to Montana, and then now we know we've seen them in the state of Washington, not far from Seattle where our son is. But anyway, Susan and I have been married for 53 years. You'll see some pictures here are pictures of us today or recently, and we'll be talking more about that as we go more along. And we're here together in Pitkin, Louisiana now. Some of you have been here. And I was fortunate that I came back when I was in the Army. I realized the course that I liked the most was plant identification. So I said, I'm coming back and I'm going to get in plant identification. And I went to LSU, but it's kind of funny. Dr. Claire Brown had retired, and they had not hired a plant ID person yet. And this guy here, Dr. John W. Thuray, was teaching at what was USL at the time, and he would drive to Baton Rouge and teach at LSU. That's where I met him. He's the most energetic, most enthusiastic person. Originally from Chicago, he kind of had trouble fitting in Lafayette and Baton Rouge, but he and I got along real well because he had a good sense of humor, always joking, always making different jokes. Like people would say, he said he could speak any language, and they'd say, well, speak Chinese to me, and he'd say, that's Greek to me, and start laughing, and then he would go on. But anyway, quite a character. And then I left at LSU. I did something that everybody should do if you can. If you're dealing with any kind of plant or any kind of animal, you should start trying to make a list, and that's what I'm still doing even today. Make a list of all those organisms in your area, whether it's 1 acre, 10 acres, 100 acres. So they allowed me, and I'm really grateful that they allow me to start to look at my home parish, St. Helena, and try to get a list of every plant there. I learned so many plants because it was like a continual Easter egg hunt, and I'm still on those. So that was my first publication in 1973. A couple of plants that I found in St. Helena Parish that were new to Louisiana. So that was tremendous, one of the best things that happened to me there. And so from there, some people at LSU were trying to encourage me to stay at LSU, but since Dr. Thuray was at USL, now of course ULL, I went there and he was a grass person. So I went to, and USL had a PhD program, so I went there. And right after I got there, I did a couple of more publications. One is on the Elismataceae of Louisiana that I did with Ben Martin, and I think he's in here tonight. I think you saw him on the list. And unfortunately, Mary Grace Curry died a few years ago there. And then we got together, the two of us, the three of us, actually, I'm sorry, the three of us got together, and we went and started collecting plants in West Feliciana, not far out of Baton Rouge. And so I ended up publishing the two together. St. Helena and West Feliciana was published by one of the programs in Lafayette and USL. So Ben Martin and Mary Grace Curry, we worked together there. And then when I moved over to USL, in the next few years, I started finding plants that were new to Louisiana, things like that. And there were 19 species of grasses pretty early. Another grass, this fern, Trichomonas petersii. I was in Lafayette, but our classes for the labs, we would go out and get real living plants. I remember some of the people along the years in teaching would say, well, you don't only get half credit for teaching a lab. And I said, I should get twice credit because I spend more time finding real plants, bringing back so the students could see the real live plants. And we were out one weekend trying to find some bryophyte, mosses, liverworts, things like that. And we stumbled upon this Trichomonas petersii. I remember telling the other person who was with me, I don't remember who it was with me at the time, that it looked like a liverwort, but was actually a fern, a very small fern. And so we spent the rest of that afternoon, we found it in two parishes that day. We went back to Lafayette and they started, oh no, you're just lucky. So that was a challenge. The next weekend or so, we were back over there in East Louisiana and we found it in 3 more parishes. And then Gary Landry found it in East Baton Rouge. So we ended up with a publication from a plant that was hardly known. I think there was one report of it from way back in the late 1800s. From that to having it in 6 parishes in East Louisiana in a period of 2 weeks by just looking, if you're focusing on looking for things. So we published that. So the two people that I remember in particular were Alan Broussard, who's I'm still communicating with him, but I haven't seen the other Alan Newman, N-E-U-M-A-N, in quite a number of years. But I don't know what happened to him, but I heard he went on to get a PhD at Texas A&M. And then the Schizandra glabra is another one, kind of interesting. It was a vine that again was very little known. But once I found it, we started looking and we found it in quite a few. So I got a number of publications through there. And here's Schizandra. So got red fruits on the left, and the fern is Trichomonas on the right. And it doesn't look anything like a typical fern. It looks like a little strip of, it does look like a liverwort, but it would be on the base of beech trees and on the base of magnolia trees. And that's the way we found it. We would find the trees and look at the base. And we went around a lot of bases of trees, and we found quite a bit of Trichomonas in Louisiana. And then also I met in Lafayette Dr. Bill Reese, who taught me a lot more. His attitude is the way to get along. I think I'm much like him, just laid back, so to speak. And it's an interesting story here. Later in life, I went to Monroe, and then I went from Monroe back to here at Fort Polk. And right after I got to Fort Polk, I got a call from him, and he said, "Can you come visit?" I said, "Okay, I'll try." So I took a day off, went down and visited with it. And it turns out he had worked on this book here on the right, the Mamu plant, but he had just developed cancer, and he didn't think he could finish it. And he asked me to take, he gave me all this paperwork, and he did pass away within about a week. And I went back and we managed to get it. So he's got my name on the book, but he did all the work. And I meant one thing I just realized I forgot. I really wanted to show you a picture out of this book to show the distribution of this plant in the United States. He took one of those red beans and put it on the map, and then took a picture of the map. And I thought I was going to think of other things that I should have put into the slideshow. But that's, if any of those of you have a copy of that, notice that, or a few others. I have one copy of that book still. But that's a very interesting aspect of the book with him. But a great person. And I did my PhD, and it was on grasses of Louisiana, and they published it there. And the book on the right is a very interesting story here. Some of you that have been to my house, I'll show you that book. Right after I published this, Grasses of Louisiana, I got a letter from Czechoslovakia. And they said, "If you will send us a copy of Grasses of Louisiana, we will send you a copy of our wildflower book, Czechoslovakia." Now, this was behind the Iron Curtain. You could not buy books from either place, the United States, and they couldn't buy. I still today don't know why they wanted Grasses of Louisiana. I'm glad I have that book. It's wonderful. You can open it up. It's got color pictures in it. It's a very interesting discussion. And I recognize the scientific names of things like dandelion and the horsetails and things like that are in it. But I still today don't know why they wanted Grasses of. I'm glad to get it, but I don't know why they would want Grasses of Louisiana. So in 1980, I moved to Eunice, the Cajun Prairie, and met and teamed up with Dr. Malcolm Vedrine, and there's Malcolm and Gail on the right, Malcolm on the left by himself. But anyway, we started working on the Cajun Prairie, which is one of the maybe the two big highlights of my career was that getting into the Cajun Prairie, finding it. So we have restored 10 acres in the city of Eunice, a wonderful place there on the north side of town with a couple of signs. And so that's been, so 1980 to 1990, I was in Eunice, and the big part was the Cajun Prairie. And did a lot. This is an Army Corps person, did a lot of transplanting, a lot of digging, seed planting, just working with the prairie. That's me over on the right in a clump of big blue stem, and it's in one of the Corps people that would come and do volunteer work throughout the United States that would come and help with the transplanting. And I was able to get a grant to put in the trails and a parking lot and I think this was I had to drive back either from Monroe or from Pitkin and check on and supervise the putting in of that parking lot that's there now and the trail. So there was a trail grant. And I said in 1980 to 1990, it could have been later, not sure when that was done. And also met Sarah Simmons, a wonderful lady. She's in her 90s, still out there planting at this point. She was also a big bird person. You're going to see more pictures and more discussion of her in just a second. She, a wonderful, wonderful lady, passed away a few years ago. And you'll see some other things with her. You mentioned Aldo Leopold. Do you know who that lady is down here in the bottom right? That is Aldo Leopold's daughter, right there. The Sarah Simmons hooked us up with the National Crane Foundation, and that's George Archibald over to the right of me. We went to, Sarah had done a lot of work and a lot of donations to the National Crane Foundation, and she took us to the National Crane Foundation. We got a personal tour by George Archibald. Then they took us to Aldo Leopold's daughter's house. That's where we are here, pictures looking at that. So it's wonderful. And there I am looking out the door of the shack of Aldo Leopold. So I'm glad your introduction earlier. I was thinking, wow, we're going to see more of that. So this was on a North American Prairie conference that I went to in Wisconsin. And that's Sarah, wonderful person. Here's Malcolm and I walking, transplanting. We did a lot of transplanting over the years together, and lots of prairies restored. In Eunice, I'm so proud of it. Where that 30 is on the right there, that's a 10 acre, the very famous one, the first one we worked on, and that was owned by Union Pacific. And I worked for quite a bit of time trying to bargain with Union Pacific to donate or to sell us that. They agreed to sell it. We raised the money, and Sarah Simmons came through again with a big donation, but we raised money all over the place with fundraisers and so forth. And in a short period of time, I was contacted by the Army Corps of Engineers, and you see those two little blue rectangles to the north. That's about 5 acres that the Union Pacific donated to the Cajun Prairie, because they had messed up some wetlands along US 165. And so one of those, the one to the right, is really great prairie. The one to the left was a mistake. I should never have taken it. We should have gotten the money from Union Pacific, because it has been impossible to we put hours and money and time into trying to bring that one back. We can't, and there just won't. But the 10 acres is where that 30 is a wonderful restored one, and the one to the right is 2.5 acres, is in much better shape. And this is just some of the paperwork that I got from Union Pacific. I forget what year it was, but I had to drive from Monroe to Opelousas, to where the parish, I almost said county, y'all would shoot me, parish seat for St. Landry Parish, and record this donation that Union Pacific had made. So that's the paperwork from them. So taught for 10 years in ULM, very happy. Lots of students. I had graduate students. Some of those are out there. Some moved on to other places. One student you're going to see a picture of in just a second, and I saw she's on here. Show a picture of her in just a second. But I was real happy, real going. But I got convinced by the people at Fort Polk to take over the plant stuff there. But it was with regret that I left. But some of the things I did, there's a park in West Monroe that students and I went through and inventoried, and they made into a park called Restoration Park right off the interstate in West Monroe. And here's Dr. Harry Winters holding my granddaughter. That's Bailey. She's now, what, 25? 26 years old. Yeah, so there we're down by Copenhagen. There's a wonderful medical doctor, and I was very lucky to have met him in Columbia, Louisiana, and he inherited some land there by Columbia, and he's got children and he's got himself, but he insisted on naming it for me. So if you go down there, there's been some changes in ownership. It was a university, but now, like Matt said on the introduction, it's owned by the Caldwell Parish Group, but it's just south of Columbia. I'm so embarrassed, Charles Allen Nature Preserve, with all his children and all the possibilities that are out there for that one. And while in Monroe, I was the Mr. Volunteer thing with the Monroe Beautification Board. There was a Volunteer of the Week. Laverne Beaudron in the top picture on the far left was the head, and the lady there giving me this is during my retirement. I was so impressed. The south side of Monroe, and this is Reverend Brown, and I would go down there and put in butterfly gardens and work with the group, and there she is. She was so impressed with the work I did down there in that part of the town, of the city of Monroe. She came over in my retirement to give me a special award. And I remember down there working with her, and the little boy looking at me, and I was using a shovel. He said, "Wow, you can really use that shovel." He was impressed by the way I could use the shovel. So I put the shovel in here. But so Reverend Brown really enjoyed it. And I haven't heard from her in years. So, but she kind of reminded me of my mother, her attitude, the way she acted, the way she talked, and so forth. So I was really hated to leave Monroe. But while I was there, I also worked with Dr. Ardell Thomas, the premier botany person for the state. He's passed away a couple of years ago, but he and I worked together to do the checklist, the atlas of the vascular flora of Louisiana. We drove all over the state to every herbarium and sit down and would write down all the locations, and ended up with the distribution. Of course, with today's internet, it's not there. And even these three publications are still out there, though. We did a volume on the monocots, a volume on half the dicots, and then the last one over on the right is the last of the dicots. These were different colors over the years. But we did a lot of traveling around the state to get the information for that. And let's see. And while I was, like I mentioned earlier, that I had done the St. Helena Parish flora. And then when I was in Eunice, it's all mixed up. I did an Allen Parish. And just within the last few months, I finally finished a third one with David and Pat Lewis. And she passed away, unfortunately, before we could finish. But there's one on Newton County, Texas now. So like I say, if you really want to learn plants or really want to learn any kind of organisms, just make it into a Easter egg hunt and try to find everything you can in an area, whether it's an acre, 10 acres, or 100 acres. It's great. Also was able to publish things in the Flora of North America. This is a program going on to try to have all the plants. I keep trying to encourage people to go there because they're online and they're free. I bought all the earlier volumes at almost $100 a volume. I think I have 10, 15 of those volumes, but they're all accessible online. So all you have to do is put the name of the family or the name of the genus in, and you go there. And I was fortunate enough to do 4 grass generis, 3 small ones, Paspaldium, Hemorrhea, Coeluricus, but my big one and the one that's crowning glory was Paspalum. And so that's probably almost the second largest genus in grass family. It's up there close to Panicum. So I was really, really excited. And then I got contacted by the Flora of California if I would do Paspalum for them. And I said, "Oh, I don't know if I have enough time," but I said, "I will." Turned out they only had 4 species, so it didn't take me very long, and they were all, easy to do. So I've got something published in the Flora of California, but it's kind of embarrassing because it didn't take me very long. I still have one more genus, the genus Stylisma, in the Convolvulaceae, which has been going on for years, but supposedly it's going to be published hopefully next year. But nobody wants any published things anymore. They all want all the internet things. So it's out there, but maybe it will be. While I was in Monroe, I worked with Joe Saunders, who had an office right down the hall from me, an archaeologist. He's passed away. It's the only article I will ever get in Science, but he worked on it hard. But there were many authors, and this was on the Watson Brake complex of archaeology. All I did was identify the seeds from the collection out there. Then I teamed up with a graduate student named Brent Harrell. He's in Kentucky now as a private lands biologist, and he just wanted me to be his supervisor or whatever. He did all the work. He tagged 12 alligator snapping turtles and followed them for a year and did all the public. All I did was help him with the writing. And we got that published finally in American Midland Naturalist. A wonderful person, Brent, in Kentucky. And while I was there, also teamed up with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Lacassine Wildlife Refuge to start another prairie just north of Eunice called the Dural Prairie. It was a situation where a farmer did not or could not, whatever, I forget the story, could not pay the taxes or something on about 300 acres. And so we had a a lady named Vicki Graff that was in charge of the wildlife refuge in Lansing, pretty good ways away. She saw that and she said, we can start Prairie. So she contacted me and collecting seeds, planting. Here I'm on the left. One bag's not enough for me. I've got 3 or 4 bags collecting seeds. Actually, I'm trying to keep them separate. That's the reason I have so many bags there. Well, I did a lot of work. We would drive back down with students. The person with his back to you here on the right is Chris Doffett, who's now with the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries. The guy on the left, Andy Dolan, was a private lands biologist, and the guy, the other 2, I don't know, but I met them. But Wayne Sovereign was a wonderful guy, but never seemed to get along with people because he was from Idaho, and so as soon as he could retire, he went back to Idaho. But he helped me a lot with the prairie at Dural. So Dural is 300 acres. A lot of people don't know about, but it's kind of out of the way. You have to really look to find it, but it's a wonderful area out there. And here's my pride and joy, and I think I saw her listed earlier. This is Cheyenne Wilburn. She's now a medical doctor in Shreveport, and she would go. One of the things I did with my grants, the other people would say, why do you let the students get some of the money or most of the money in most cases for traveling and so forth? And I said, well, they need it, and I can get along with what I'm getting paid. And so she's out there collecting seeds, and she went on to medical school. Talked to her the other day and asked her if I could use a picture, and there she is. If you look, she's a pediatric doctor in Shreveport. So, and one thing I remember, one time I'm filling out paperwork for her, I spelled it Willburn. She said, you got my name is Will Burn, not Will Born. So I remember that as we filled out the paperwork earlier. So, hi, Cheyenne, how are you doing? And then did a number of things while I was in Monroe, between Monroe and today. And one of those was going to the North American Prairie conferences and also to the Eastern Native Grass Symposiums. I would always give a paper and would go with those and enjoyed the visits there. And these are other people through the systems. Gary Landry and I did a lot of plant collecting together in Lafayette. Mark Pastorek calls me almost every other day to check on my foot, and he's in Colorado now, but he did a lot of the prairie. And of course, Jim Foray over on the right taught a lot of students and sent me students to work at Fort Polk. We'll talk about that in a second. So there are people, like I say, there are other people I should have had on here. Over the years, these are kind of overlapping. This started when I was in Eunice, continued when I was in Monroe, and still goes on today. There was a program, the late Robert Murray, who lived not far from here, but it taught at LSU, worked for wildlife and fisheries, but he started a program over here called Bogs, Birds, Bagels, Mini Bees, the BBB. We add bees every year. And so it's been going, I think it's 30-something years it's been going on. Originally, he had it like mid-May because he could find 2 orchids in flower. And we kind of, over the years, decided, well, maybe we should move it a little bit. So some years it's in mid-May. The next year it's in early April. So we have it back and forth. So we've been able to keep it going that time. And here's some people that some of you may recognize, and people down there. There's daughter Dawn and granddaughter, the one that was being held by Dr. Winters, their Bailey, right in front of her. The guy squatting down in the background there is Jim Robinson, Louisiana Arboretum. Away in the back is a medical doctor for the town of Elizabeth nearby, Jim Foray with the stick, several other people. Oh, the guy with the stick right by Dawn over there is George Broussard. I'll be showing him in a moment. He's passed away. I was kind of looking this and got saddened because I believe there are 4 people on here that have passed away since the picture. But that's one of those. So like I say, BBB mid-May, early April. We haven't set next year's yet. Then we also started doing a thing for the middle of August where we can find that orchid on the left in flower and that Carolina lily on the right. course, I didn't get to go this year, but it may not have made any difference because it was so dry. I don't know if they were out there, but I didn't. So this is the first year. This is 14, 15 years, something like that we've been doing this lily orchid thing in mid. Some of you have been on the tour with that. And then for a while, we did a few things back up toward Monroe in Columbia. We call it the CCC, Columbia Catahoula Caravan. Also, usually it was in middle of June, summer solstice. So you can see some people here, some big crowds. That's one I was telling myself I really need to crank back up and go back up that way because there's some great territory to see in that Columbia and also down in the Catahoula National Forest. So the tours that I've been doing or leading or scheduling over the years. Once for a while there's Susan in the middle of the daffodil patch halfway between Monroe and Winfield, and Annette Parker and some other people organized a thing that we call Daffodil Dash. We go out in February and we go see all the daffodils, of course, in flower, and there are several places up there in North Louisiana. I don't understand why North Louisiana, especially right along Interstate 20, there are a lot of daffodils, but once you get down into central and further south, especially, daffodils just are not as happy as they are in that slightly cooler, slightly different temperature along Interstate 20 in that area up there. So Daffodil Dash, another one. And here at our property, we do a thing called Butterfly Blast. That's this coming weekend. This coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Have some people coming in for that. We don't have as many butterflies. It's been dry, but Susan has been regularly watering about a 20 by 30 stretch with lots of lantana, and we get reports and see butterflies out there, even a zebra swallowtail yesterday or day before. So, and we also do the tagging of the monarchs that are flying through. If they're here, I have the tags ready. So just come on down, monarchs, and we'll put a tag on you this coming weekend. And been a lot of LNPS meetings. Some of you may recognize, again, I hate to show some of these slides because 2 out of these 3 people are no longer with us, Richard Johnson and Margie Jenkins, but John Marone still is. So these are some people that are native plant, Louisiana native. Richard and I were in the original 1983 first forming of the LNPS along with Jessie Johnson. She's still alive, so that's on my list. I need to go to Briarwood and visit with Jessie. But Margie came in later, but Richard and I were there, and there's a few other people. I think Ben Martin was at that first meeting too, so I think he's on here tonight too. So that's the LNPS. Then somewhere along the way, I got hooked up with Texas. Texas has been so close, and so these are the Native Plant Society of Texas meetings that I've been to. The one with an asterisk I gave a presentation at. And there's one coming up November 9 through 11, and I'm scheduled to talk about sedges and grasses at that one. That one's so close. It's in Nacogdoches, which is only 2 hours or so from me. But if you look at the places, and I really have enjoyed the Texas Native Plant Society people. It's a larger group, but they're very, very friendly group of people over the years. And I'm sure that some of those I won't see because they won't be with us anymore when I go. We've been a few meetings missing. And then when I left Monroe, I took over the botany at Fort Polk, and I worked for Fort Polk Environmental, but technically I worked for Colorado State University Center for Environmental Management of Military Lands. Now that's a mouthful. Now, anybody out there looking for a job, they're almost always hiring people throughout the United States because they have people on every military base, Air Force, every one, CEMML. Just Google and almost, I'd say, have jobs in Alaska, everywhere. So, and over the years, every summer we would bring in students to work, and so they got hands-on training in learning plants. And this is a list of the ones I remember from LSU, from Lafayette, from Monroe, from LSUA, from Stephen F. Austin, from UNO, and one guy even from Florida. the guy from Florida I followed, he now works in Alaska, and he and his wife opened a B&B in Anchorage, Alaska. So we get communication from him. So about 80 of them, I think. And those publications, then I started sharing with the students. So like Chris Doffett was the lead author on Amsonia ludoviciana in Utah, Texas. Ariel Dozart, most of these are from Lafayette. We worked together, and she did a publication on Uvularia. And Jacob Delahoussaye, that sounds like a real Cajun name. Jacob was a wonderful guy, and actually worked even here on the Allen Acres with us some. And he did one on Zygodenas, Xanthorrhiza, which is yellow root, Rachel there. And then Tanidia Jared Grandin was originally from Monroe, but he lived in Lafayette and went to ULL, and he did one. And then we had one. My son's friend from UNO was a visitor from Hungary, and he worked here. So our international aspect is through the years on the publication. So they're all the lead authors on the different publications there. And then after I left, I still had to participate in, well, not had to, but I wanted to participate in the thesis. And one of those was Sarah Timms, who had started with me, but once I left, she finished at ULM. Jared Grandin got his master's in Lafayette. And one of the more interesting is Jennifer Blanchard. She was at UNO, but she did her work on the plants here at Fort Polk. And so I went all the way to UNO for her thesis. And she's now getting a PhD at LSU in medical. So through the years as students that even I left the university, I was still involved with the universities. And the books that were mentioned earlier, they're there. We're the most recent one, that Gardening for Butterflies and Moths, and those are available. You can get them online from our website, or if you're here, and a lot of people have them already. And unfortunately, we've lost 3 people. But the 3 people on the right is Pat Lewis, and the guy in the middle is George Broussard, and the guy on the left is Ken Wilson, who's the photographer for the Wildflower book. So those, I don't know why it just keeps jumping off of that one, but anyway, those 3 people, unfortunately. And then that's the publications I mentioned earlier about the Prairie conferences and so forth that I went to. One of the most interesting aspects, Fort Polk was gracious enough to send me to work with the Caddo, and the idea that they used switchgrass before, and that since they were moved off the land here, the environmental person at Fort Polk thought we should help with that. So we would go to Lawrence, Kansas, and there's Susan on the left. And I always titled this little slide here, East Meets West. You got a Native American and an Oriental working together there to build the grass house. On the right, the taller guy is Bill Cross, a really wonderful Caddo historian, and we went there and put that house together in the back. I think sometime in next March, I'm supposed to give a talk in San Antonio about that, so I'm looking forward to that. And there I am inside the grass hut with the putting it together, and over on the right, they built 2 kinds of switchgrass huts. This was for the summer. There's another one that's taller and bigger for the winter. The bottom is not open like that. So they had the idea of air conditioning. But since we were limited in time, it was there. The wood that's there, and the wood that you see over on the right, are willow branches from Louisiana that we cut and took to Lawrence, Kansas to put it together. It's a very interesting aspect of that. And let me back up for a second. 3 or 4 of these female students here and I went to a North American Prairie conference in Nebraska, and they gave a talk with me together, and we went to a motel that night. And in my talk, I talked about the spikelets, which is a term used in grasses. Well, they went to a motel and they went out to the karaoke, and they named themselves something and the spikelets. So they were using a new word they just learned. But I'm sure that nobody else in the bar had ever heard of spikelet, but I thought it was very interesting that they picked up on the word that was used in their grass terminology. So there's that. And then did a number of the conferences over the years, particularly Nacogdoches and also at the big ticket conferences in Texas. And these are the native plant conferences that I've been to. I like the big one, the Colorway in North Carolina. I've been there 3 times. The one I did a grass ID, one I did one on the Cajun Prairie. And the one that was so popular was the edible plants. But it was so interesting, they wouldn't let me do like I do here. I couldn't use real plants. They were worried about lawsuits. So I had to do a slideshow. So I had to put together. So unusual. I'm used to just spreading the plants out and we were eating left and right and so forth, but they made me. Then there are some satellite conferences from Colorway. There was one in Ruston, one in New Orleans, one in Baton Rouge and Lafayette, and of course those. And there have been quite a few over in Nacogdoches. I've been to those too, in Texas, of the satellite conferences. And one of the big persons there is named Peter Luce, and he's got a ponytail. So I have this fake cap ponytail. So one is real, one is Peter, and one is me. So you can figure out which is which. So Peter's quite a character, quite a good friend of ours, and known him for quite a number of years with lots of plants, involved a lot in the Cajun Prairie and also in the Louisiana Native Plant Society. He's the one on the left. So anyway, that's Peter Luce. And once we moved, I look back and think about hating to leave Monroe, but we were lucky that we landed on 26 acres and we've turned it into a natural area that really lots of things going on here all the time. So we're just very, very fortunate with the natural area that we have and so many things that are here. And then we're right adjacent to the Cassatt National Forest. We also have paper companies around us and neighbors that don't mind our weirdness. Like this, we have Appalachian art out there. We have a known zone. We have a hurricane warning system. I had all this farm implements here and I put them up thinking, oh, I'll have a wind chime. Then I realized hey, it's going to take one heck of a wind to make any noise out of that chime. So it's my hurricane warning system. We also heard about blue trees or protests out of Denmark. So I think we still have the only blue trees in Louisiana. We just painted them, but no, we didn't. We would have volunteers that would come in. I call them fools that would come and help us paint them. So, and then we also have at the bottom right over there, I don't know how well it's showing up, a thing called Languages of the World. So I had enjoyable, informative gardens on one pole on all 4 sides. And then I let Google translate into 60 languages. So I have Ukrainian, of course, French, German, all these languages out there. It needs to be redone because some of the papers is tearing up. But anyway, that's looking forward to this winter, getting back to redoing the languages of the world. And we also have bottle trees. And of course, the bottle trees when evil spirits come up to our house at night, we don't have to worry about them. They go into the bottle instead of into our house. So we're safe. And then when the sun comes up, it destroys I don't have to go out there and dump the bottles. They get destroyed inside the bottle. So, and that's an area view. Mark Pasternak did it with a drone a couple of years ago. And that thing with the funny markings there in the middle is a labyrinth. We have a labyrinth made out of vetiver grass. And the edible plant workshops, plants are spread out all over the table. I think Matt participated in some of those. And then we're outside too with the plants. And then the plant ID classes. So the plants outside, plants around, lots of pitcher plants around us. Then, like Matt said in my introduction, we got into an addiction. Be careful of this one, a mothing addiction, because there's so many out there. It's one of those that are maybe forever. But we designed and put up mercury vapor lights, and Susan sews those sheets special so we can have them real tight with brackets. We travel with sheets sometimes, And when you do, you tie them up. They really blow in the wind, but ours don't blow in the wind. In fact, sometimes I jokingly say those sheets are so tight the moths bounce off. But anyway, the lights and so forth are all set up, and we have other people have copied that. And so here's some of the mercury vapor light results. We'll be doing that this weekend, and we have the sheets scattered all over the property. The numbers of the trails that you can walk to. A lot of people walk that. And all the way in the back, all the way to my neighbors over to the where number 12 is, and way in the back where the National Forest is. So you get some numbers here in a moment. We've had 4 bug guide gatherings here with the national thing out of Iowa. This was our first one, and this is our moon moth garden with the daturas that open at night, and there are lots of hummingbird moths, and these I would have liked to, I could have just sold the cameras that were here at that time. I could never worked again. There was quite a bit of camera money involved out there on our nights out here. And here's some more of that. That's bug guide thing. And then during National Moth Week, we participate. So their moths are there. Some of the ones that we've seen, all of these are from Allen Acres. And there are other insects too. So we're getting quite a list. I'll put some numbers up here in a second. We also do fungi. In fact, Sunday, the 1st of October, David Lewis will be here at 9 o'clock leading. It's been so dry, I don't know, but he can always find mushrooms. But anyway, that he's doing a tour at Allen Acres on Sunday at 9. And here's our biodiversity. Plants are 544 and growing. We buy and add to them, and there are probably others out there. Moth species have grown to 1044 with 277, the only record for Louisiana on bug guide here. And the other insects like all of the beetles and things like that is up to 746, and 200 of those are only in Louisiana. Butterflies, 59, birds, 67, and we have almost anything that's alive out there. We have a record for it. And sometime in February, most of the time, we send out notices that we're going to do these kinds of projects. Like we made this 2 doors down here out of old unused doors that were in the barn. We got here. And here are some of the people: Sonny Kent Milton, Jackie Duncan, who's nearby, and Mui Lee, who's from Monroe. And they show up and help us with the various projects we have going. And Susan's brother, unfortunately, here on the right, passed away. He was our standby person for doing a lot of our work on the property. He would drive from Lafayette. We'd pay him, but he would help us a lot and stay with us and do a lot of the work. But he passed away. And we had some master naturalists here, and they were from Baton Rouge. But one of the participants is Christine here, and she lives nearby in DeRidder. So when she was here, and she had her son with her too, and I said, if your son's interested, I would like for him to come and help me. We'd pay him. She said, yeah, he's going to school, but I'm coming. I said, what? And now she's the most energetic person. I just have to tell her and turn around, and she's got it done. So I couldn't believe how much she gets done out there. So this is Christine, who's a wonderful addition to our property. And during the winter, we give away a lot of plants. People ask me why. I said, well, I've got them. People need them, and we're not going to hurt the population. If we dig them up, and we still have more, and we still have more. It's like pruning them. So we normally give away. And we have a super duper crop of pawpaws this winter. So be ready. And these pawpaws, I've had reports back, produce fruits in a couple of years, not like some of those you buy in the pots and so forth. But I don't know. That's what I've heard. But anyway, ours make, but not this year. It was just too dry. We also have grasses. We have herbs, some shrubs, and some trees. So those are things that will start November, December through February that we give away for those. The Master Naturalist Program is a wonderful going on in Louisiana. The main ones that visit us is Baton Rouge, and then also Acadiana and Lake Charles have started to come, especially Acadiana. Central Louisiana a little bit, Also, we've had master gardeners visit Allen Acres for different programs. And they're the two big leaders of the master naturalists, Catherine Givenden on the left, who's Baton Rouge group, and Betty Copeland from Monroe actually taught at ULM just like me, and she's now the president of the statewide group. And I think Catherine's schedule will be in a couple of years the president. These two come a lot, bring people here a lot. Then another thing that I've done is a thing I do every morning, a thing called the plant of the day, and also include a moth and a pun every morning. And then also on Sunday, I include, send out upcoming events like this one and other events. There's one tomorrow in Baton Rouge on the herbarium records, things like that. And then also do, on Monday, I put in a song called Music Monday. Started out with 200 to 300 people, so my internet would let me send it out. But now it's grown to 1,400 people, and it's scattered across Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas. I've even got people in Maine, Oregon, and so forth. So with that, my internet won't let me, so I use a company in Pennsylvania that will allow me, I have to send it to them, they send it out. Otherwise, those smaller companies are blocked by spam. So they're usually doing it they always have a little thing there to check off how much money have I made, and I've not made any yet because I'm not charging. It's not advertising for me. It's just putting out the plant. And you can email me, or you can go to the www.allenacresbnb.com, and there's a place to sign up. There's always room for one more person. What's 1,401 going to make a difference? So, or you can email me, the native@camtail.net, and I can add you to the list. So that's there. I'm going to leave that for a second for the people to write it down. native@camtail.net is my email, and if you go directly to our website, there's a place just to sign up there, so I don't have to do it. But either way, it doesn't take me but a second to add it back to it. So that one's going on. And we, every October, have been going for about 10 years to the Rio Grande Valley. A wonderful trip if you can make it. There's so many nature stations and so many plants that are different, so many butterflies that are different. Of course, I also put up moth sheets, and that moth at the bottom there, I got last year, and it's the only record for the United States up to this point. That one right there, I couldn't believe. I didn't even know what I had. I got back, and sure enough, it's there. And it's still, I checked the other day, and nobody has found that you have to go on iNaturalist further into Central and South America to find any others. I don't, but we're real close to the Mexican border, but then I'm the only person truly, I know there are a lot of people down there looking at moths, looking at butterflies, but nobody, I got lucky on that one. And here's some of the butterflies that we get from the Rio Grande Valley trip that we're planning October 23rd, I think, we're picking out this year. And over the years, this is our two dogs before. Some of you, if you had come many years ago, you would have met Punctata with all the dots on her, named for the plant. And look at Yin Yang. Look at half of her face was black and half was white. She had to be Yin Yang. But those passed away, and now we have Willow and Tannin. Both of these are so friendly. They just lie there and wait. Kids love them. I'm surprised that we've been able to keep Willow because everybody wants to take her home. But Willow and Tannin are very, very friendly dogs. And then, of course, you couldn't do all of this without a family. So here's my oldest daughter and her husband, Dawn and Jeff, and he owns Almost Eden Plants, and he's really a plant person too. We're lucky. Here's her two daughters, Crystal and Bailey, and then Crystal is married to John, and we'll see so we have two granddaughters here. And then my second daughter is Tanya. She's got a PhD in math and teaches at LSUA, and they were in Scotland recently, and here they are with my two grandsons, Aaron and Hayden. Aaron's supposed to be a super duper soccer player, but he's got a super duper head of hair right now, that's for sure. And then Tanya and Marcus, and that's in Chinese they would say cow number two, daughter number two. And then here's our son, the youngest, and he got married late, and that's our youngest granddaughter. but over there on the left in Kalaya from the Philippines. So we got quite a mixed family, but that they live in Seattle. And here are the two highlights. These are the two great grandsons, Spencer and Caspian. They were just here recently. So that's the family. And I've got not walking off into the sunset yet. I've got lots more to do, but I want to thank you for listening, and I'll try to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. That was fantastic. I'll ask just a couple questions and we'll open it up. I guess because we're happy to have so many people, if you raise your hand, see that function, that'd be the most helpful for us. But I want to say I was a little, maybe the rumors about you being from Mississippi are in fact true with your thinking that St. Landry was a county, but we'll skip that for now. When you're doing restoration work for prairies, for instance, what's your raw material as to deducing what to restore it to? Are there documents that show that, or you do it forensically?
For the prairie, we really didn't have much because the only prairie we saw were remnant strips, and so they were small. So we based it on what we saw there. We did a lot of, Dr. Vedrine and I did a lot of work and did some publications on what was there, but that was based on the remnants that were left along the railroad rights-of-way. So when we did that, what we did was go out and collect seeds and plants from there and put back. If you could, I guess the best way is to decide what was there before and try to restore that. But for a lot of people that are dealing with small pieces of property in cities and things like that, you may want to look at a meadow, which is like an artificial prairie where you're bringing in herbaceous plants because you probably already have lines of trees, and you don't, those are you're limited to the number of trees, but you can really expand with the number of herbaceous plants and make it into a meadow. It's sort of like an artificial prairie where it wasn't before. Yeah.
Right. Another question I had, a historical botany question for you. I think it was Kelby Uchley who told me roughly that maybe it was the USGS that sometime in the 19th century, did surveys all around the United States by they take a mark and they would walk directly in each cardinal direction and record the first tree they encountered. Does that ring any bells with you? You know what I'm shooting in the dark.
That's the way they did land surveys.
Okay.
That's the way they did land surveys. And so they had witness trees. So you would have corners. In fact, we got lucky. We found out about when we lived in Eunice, we found out about the St. Landry Parish having records like that from the 1800s at the courthouse in Opelousas. So we went there and they would allow us to copy them down. So you would see at the corner, if it was trees, they would, like you say, there would be 4 trees, one, there would be a center tree, the witness tree, and then the 3 on either side. So people have actually published papers on reconstruction of the vegetation of whatever before mankind, before too much destruction by humans. But the one in the prairie, it was funny. They would say a sassafras pole driven in the ground because there were no trees. But when the trees are there are witness trees. In fact, on Dr. Winter's property, the nature preserve up there is a big old overcrop oak that was a witness tree, and you could see the markings on it and so forth, and see it on the land surveys. Yeah.
So let's say I went into the Ouachita Parish courthouse and I asked, what would I ask for? So that you mentioned in St. Landry, you found the document. How did y'all find it?
If there are any original land surveys, and
Okay.
there are people, see where there's some publications on that. Some people were doing some of that. I think maybe that was here at Fort Polk, where they would, if you can, usually in the parish, the courthouse somewhere, there's some original land surveys, and those would show the points. And then there have been people that design how to reconstruct based kind of ecology stuff on how to reconstruct based on the trees that are marked, that were written down. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. With your moth work, what's your go-to for identifying all these moths?
I post them on Bug Guide, and there's a guy named Bob Biaga in Arizona that he just kind of watches for mine. He identifies them, but I've learned some, and I kind of know where to put them. And every time I identify, just like I did with plants, every time I get a new species identified on Bug Guide, I know a lot of people use iNaturalist, and there's some artificial intelligence there too that will identify them for you. And it's a lot more reliable with moths than it is with trees, because you can get the whole moth in the picture. But anyway, once I go to Bug Guide, I look at the other species in the genus and look at the pictures, just like I did when I was learning plants. So that way, when I come upon that plant, I may already know what it is, or I know what to look for to distinguish this moth from that moth, things like that. So it's like Bug Guide is set up like a book, but iNaturalist has that, and I use that artificial intelligence for many to verify my moths, to get me in the right category to begin with. So there is artificial intelligence out there on iNaturalist that will give you a name, and just about everybody's gone to iNaturalist. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'll turn it over to questions from other people. Some in the chat. We'll look for those. If anyone wants to go ahead and raise their hand, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Dr. Allen directly. Yeah, actually, Cheyenne, or if you wanted, Carpenter, if you wanted to unmute yourself, and yeah, Dr. Carper, if you're here, but I don't recall you out. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, go ahead and if y'all have questions for Dr. Allen, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll go through the chat.
Oh, hi, Cheyenne. How you doing?
Good evening, Dr. Allen. How are you doing today?
Good.
Yes, sir.
Good. How about you? It's good to see you.
It's so good to see your face, and you have been a great inspiration to me, and I feel like so honored to be included here tonight as I listen to different things to learn about your life that I didn't know.
Well, thank you, and you made a good point in your life too. Glad you moved on to a medical doctor. Wow.
Well, we're so honored to have you here tonight too. Thank you so much. Dr. Allen, do you remember go ahead. What was the first plant that you discovered new to Louisiana? Do you remember?
It was one of those in the St. Helena Parish. There were actually two. One was Galium. I can't remember the second species. A black fruited Galium that's fleshy Galium, and then the other was an orchid. Coloriza with Odontoriza. Yeah, there's a lot of Coloriza. In fact, some right there in Monroe, Coloriza Wisteriana, but Odontoriza is pretty rare, and I found it over in that St. Helena Parish thing. Yeah.
Is there? I know you and I have talked about pondberry. For those of us who are out in the woods, what rare plants should we be looking for in Louisiana?
The one that hasn't been found, but pondberry is a mystery. There was a report of it from the Ouachita Parish, Arkansas. Well, no, Ouachita Parish didn't go to Arkansas. The next parish up from Ouachita, Morehouse Parish. Yeah, and people have gone there. There were grants for it. They reported it, finding it there, but nobody's seen pondberry. It's over in Mississippi, but not today in Louisiana. But there's one record of it from that area up there. So people, when we were in Monroe, we looked for it. Kelby has looked for it. So it's, yeah.
Okay, so
That's one of the rare ones. But you never know. Some of these just surprise you. You come up on something and you say, this is too big a jump. That just can't come this far. Like when I found yellow root, which is a plant that's normally up in Tennessee. And when I found it here in Fort Polk, I said, it just doesn't make sense. It's some of these that have the big gaps, you don't believe you've done it, that you found it that far. But you know, they do. Plants surprise you sometimes. And animals too, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Dr. Allen, if I can ask you to stop share with your screen, that way we can see people and with their questions more readily. That you can see, and you can see
Okay,
the
let me
chat.
see if I
Yeah.
can. Let me see. Oh. Oh.
You got it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there they are. Okay.
There we
Look at all
go.
these people.
All right, we're all back together again. Oh yeah, Alan Broussard again. I don't want to call you out, but I'm sure it'd be nice to have y'all if you wanted to visit with Dr. Allen.
Oh, I see Jennifer too.
Yeah. What's Music Monday, Dr. Allen?
I don't know. Some reason I started a few weeks, months ago, just putting a song out there, an upbeat song. Like I started out with things about Louisiana, but now just upbeat songs, things like that. Green Acres, so Allen Acres, something for people just to click on Monday. So that's something they can was added to it. Once I started, people suggested I keep doing it. So.
How do you come up with the idea to put puns into each of your emails? We always enjoy that.
When I had an office in Monroe, I would look up puns and put them up on the wall. And when when he came to visit me, he saw those and said, "You got to put them in the book." So some of my books have puns in them, but then some of them were a little risque. And then my granddaughter was there, and so I had to take some down. So for the puns in Monroe, yeah. Dr. Winters, yeah, said you just got to put these into the books. Yeah.
Oh man! Hey,
Sometimes it takes me longer to find the pun. Sometimes it takes me longer to find the pun than it does to write the plant material. The one I want to use, yeah.
It's a miracle you've come up with somebody. Hey, Brett Bates, did you want to unmute yourself?
I hope I repeat them though.
Oh, okay. Well, not surprisingly. Brett, if you had a question for Dr. Allen, I saw in the chat you wanted to speak with him.
I just wanted to just thank him. I think the first time I ever heard of Dr. Allen, I heard of his night blooming garden. I didn't know anything about plants. I just felt like, wow, like that was just a magical time, like a night blooming garden. It just stimulated curiosity. And I remember going there and I remember coming out, it was like 11 o'clock at night, and he looked like the grave digger. And he was so faithful to these moths, and that was inspiring. And then to see hummingbird moths like parrots landing on your shoulder, wow, that was magical. And the magic really hasn't stopped for me. And I just want to thank that man for being curious. Yeah, I just wanted that on the record. Thanks.
Brett, thank you so much. I think we can all agree the curiosity is the lifeblood that brings us all here. And again, it's Dr. Allen's enthusiasm that just.
Oh wait,
okay.
Pardon me.
Ahead,
Pardon me. And what really makes Dr. Allen special is that he somehow has been timeless because he has learned how to take advantage of his irreducible rascality. He's a character, and I love it. Thank you, Dr. Allen. You have been a great joy in my life.
Thank you.
Brett, I get kind of mystery. That was such a great phrase. I don't know. I might want that on my tombstone. But thank you so much for those observations, Brett. Charles Paxton, if you want to jump in with a question?
Yes, please. Sorry to trouble you. If you're planting your garden, your backyard, with wild plants, are there some that we should plant together to give them a better chance in life? Because this has been a hard year, but we've had other hard years. I'm quite surprised at how I can kill my native plants. They don't seem to have a great survival rate. I was wondering if community planting is the answer, sort of planting plants together.
I don't know if it's so much together as much as this, and I haven't been able to make a many trips out, but I will in the next few days, and with with Christine's help and my family's help, we're going to get out there and get it ready for this coming weekend. But I think the biggest thing is if the plants are already in place and they are natives, they usually survive this dry weather. This thing we'll see. We don't know until we come out the other end. But I think we're going to see quite a few of the native plants, and we may see some of the things from exotics that didn't make it, and also, of course, obviously, hopefully nobody was transplanting or moving anything in the last 2 months, because it would be almost impossible for them. Now, some areas may have been getting rain, but I think a lot of areas like ours would really be ridiculous to try to have moved anything this year. Now, I'm looking forward to November, December, January, February, like I always do, and I'll be moving and giving away, like we say. And we got pawpaws galore, so I mean they're all over the sprouts. There are lots of sprouts out there for pawpaws this year.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Thanks, Charles. Well, I enjoy your accent there, Charles. How's
Charles is
Kim?
from very North Louisiana. Charles is a very good friend and does great work with master naturalists up here. And I want to point out, I mean, it's just nice.
He and Kim have been here.
Yeah. And it's not, I've learned so much from Charles, but I just want to point out, it's nice all the connections that County and Charles do work out at Restoration Park, which you started. So that's just wonderful. It warms my heart. Paris, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Have I unmuted myself?
You have.
Okay. I was proud to be part of a February 2015 Master Naturalist class from Acadiana, from Lafayette. And I wanted to speak to something because I'm from a family of cooks. We've been talking about plants and insects and this and that. But boy, Dr. Allen and his wife and his daughter sure can cook up some victuals that are wonderful, delicious, nutritious. And I just wanted to put in a plug for spending time with him and catching one of his calendar events that he is not oversubscribed to yet. And just thank him for his sharing tonight. And thank you, Matt, for yours as well. I'm learning to like you even. So there you go. But thank you. I just want to say,
raise my hand and say I have nothing to do with the cooking. It's Susan. Susan is the cooking. I can only boil the water.
Well, I wanted to get someone else to get some credit too. So there you go. We enjoyed them. And we enjoyed your whole place. We were there from daybreak to after sunset to see the Luna moths. And it's just that magic has changed my life as well. And I see more now because Dr. Allen is a great seeing improver. He teaches you to see. And he made one comment I'll never forget. And there's usually more life in a square foot in your own backyard if you'll just look and find and be curious than you've ever found or seen before in just a square foot. So, dig down a foot or whatever. So thank y'all so much for doing this. I look forward to the next presentation, and I don't want to hog the time, but thank y'all so much.
Oh, thank you, Joe. That was really eloquent. You really summed up Dr. Allen, the way so many of us feel about that, and the improvement in seeing. I completely agree with you on that. Going through the chat, anybody else want to? Yeah, Mr. Chason says, I haven't. Dr. Allen, can you read Mr. J. Chason's? I don't know if he's it's Mr. or Ms. Anyhow, here's
it's Ms. I'm sorry. It's Joan. I couldn't fix my name.
Hey, Joan, and sorry if my North Louisiana pronunciation was bad. My South Louisiana.
No, that's fine. I've lived out of Louisiana. I've heard quite a few other pronunciations.
Well, Joan, if you don't mind, would you ask Dr. Allen directly your question?
Certainly. I live in Livingston Parish, which, if anybody doesn't know, it's just directly east of East Baton Rouge Parish. And although I'm really interested in the Cajun Prairie, which I just learned about earlier this year, I don't know what historically grew here, and I haven't planted any natives intentionally. I just wonder if there are any books or other publications that I might turn to. I do plan to buy seeds, hopefully for sprouting in the spring.
Well, I would, of course, St. Helena is just north of Livingston, so I know exactly where it is. But you may want to look at a meadow. That's like an artificial prairie where you can put those almost anywhere. In fact, some of us say that along our highway rights of ways, along our pipelines and power line rights of ways, we have artificial miles and miles of artificial prairie would be called meadows. So you could plant your herbaceous plants there. Of course, there are certain, if you're in the northern part of Livingston, you're almost in the St. Helena. And that's where that trichomonas, that little fern, was first found, almost on the St. Helena Parish, Livingston Parish line is where I found that trichon on the base of trees. Now, if you're further south, you're going to get more like the swamp, the more like you're not going to have the acid pH. So when I give talks, I tell people not to worry about growing zones, but worry about the pH of the soil. That's so important because many plants are often more restricted by the pH of the soil. So if you're in southern Livingston, you don't have much pH. You may have to add if you want to grow like blueberries, but if you're in northern, closer to St. Helena, you would have your pH already and grow blueberries there. So watch that pH and watch where you are with the pH of the soil. And for that, it makes I think more important. And I don't even worry about the growing zones because I think all of Louisiana is basically a little bit, you could think maybe 2, North Louisiana, South Louisiana, but all these other 3, 4, 5, whatever growing zones, just look at the pH. And people in New Orleans should not grow blueberries unless they buy a lot of sulfur to make the pH more. Those people across Lake Pontchartrain can grow blueberries left and right because the pH is different. So the pH of the soil is a lot more important to me than the growing zones. Yeah.
That's good to know. I'm just north, maybe a mile north of I-12.
Wow.
Okay, so you're kind of in the border in between.
In 8B.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen.
No, thank you so much for that
You're
question.
welcome.
I've learned so much. Yeah. Wendy Holland, if you wanted to unmute yourself.
I'm here.
Hey, Wendy.
Hi. I had a question that I am in Rapides Parish in Alexandria, and I'm just now getting started with getting interested in native plants and trying to learn about them, trying to, walking through the woods and picking different ones and taking pictures and Googling pretty much everything I see. It's been an adventure, that's for sure. Honestly, as far as meadows, I wouldn't know one if I saw it. Honestly, I'm in the suburbs. But I'm wondering if Dr. Allen might have any suggestions on people or publications that would give me a baseline for what I could be looking for in Rapides Parish, because everything that I'm finding is for much further south. And, the coastal prairie, there's tons of information there. There's so many great resources, but I'm just not finding anything for my area here.
Again, with Rapides, if you're closer to the Alexandria itself, you're going to be with the pH of needing acid. But if you're out the western part, toward the national forest, you have the acid pH already. So, but the meadow, and also the other thing that I talk about too when I do eco regions or landscaping, I point out that there are people that are limited because they're living on lots rather than acres. And so there you're thinking about smaller, and you may do a postage stamp meadow or smaller flower bed type things with with that. And of course, watch your trees and know where the sun is, because you don't want to start shading your whole property, but put your taller trees on the north side to the south side, with, or the sun is normally kind of in the southern hemisphere in the summer, so you want to don't block your sunlight for your plants by putting the tall trees in the wrong place. So think about where the trees are, think about where the sun is. I know where the sun is here on my property just about throughout the year. What part of it I can go out and see where it is and realize I have to be careful where I put taller trees, or it will block the plants on the other side. So think about that. But you could, even on small, 1 acre, and even in pots, some people grow plants in pots and keep them that way. And so I always talk about that. We all often talk about native plant landscaping, native plant planting, but first we need to think of how big a property do you have and where is it? And if it's if it's like me, I didn't have to do much. I've had people come here and said, "Did you plant this?" And I said, "No, I moved here. This is a pine forest." So if you were one of those people in the western side of Alexandria, you may have quite a bit of plants already. But if you're downtown or on the east side, for some reason, the Mississippi and the Red River, those floodplains in the past, before we built levees, must have destroyed all the herbaceous plants. You just don't think of herbaceous plants along the Mississippi River. You don't think of herbaceous plants along the floodplains. They seem to be up in the pine forest. So just depending on where you are, how big your property consideration. And I do have done talks. I think there's one coming up in January in Baton Rouge on something like that I'll be talking about, that landscaping thing at the January, I think 26th. There's a landscaping thing at Hilltop Arboretum. So that first, especially for that person in Livingston Parish, that's much closer for you.
Good
Thank
question,
you.
Winnie. Dr. Allen, is there a pH map for the state? If I wanted to find the pH of the soil in, say, Southern Red River Parish, how would I know that?
I think it's more by what you have to think about, where the pine trees are or were. That's going to be the acid pH, and where they aren't, it's going to be less acid and things like that. So it's more like the like in your case in Monroe, West Monroe, and it's going to be acid pH, but Monroe itself is going to be a basic pH there. Yeah.
Ah, good.
So you kind of have to know. I don't know if there's ever been a map done, but maybe with the types of soils, it may tell you the pH, when you look at the soil types. Yeah.
And this is showing my ignorance about this. How rapidly would pH of a soil change? So if we found the pH for a soil in 1900, would it likely to be different now?
It could be, depend with the levees that were put up, but no, it should not change. But the easiest way, of course, to change it to, in most cases, to go more acid is to add sulfur. To go less acid is to add lime. So that's right. Yeah.
Thanks. Marty Floyd very helpfully pointed out that soil surveys are available for all parishes. And Charles Paxton says in a sort of haughty English accent, just kidding, just a joke, we're friends. Soil web can tell you.
Yeah, I think Wallace,
Yeah. Kerry Wallace submitted a question from Nathan in Abita Springs. Dr. Allen, what do you foresee to be the biggest challenge we are facing here in Louisiana for conservation and biodiversity? And what can the younger generation do to address those challenges?
I think education is a big important thing. We had a person here last week that had visited once before and came back, and he brought a plant in, and Christine was here, my daughter was here, and Susan was here, and we all right away recognized it as buttonbush. We had a hard time convincing him that he should not round up it. It's got a wonderful butterfly plant. It's a native, but that's an education to let people know native plants in general, just any plant, just about, would help with the carbon dioxide problem, that it would take in carbon dioxide and it would, give out oxygen. But just the idea of basic botany that I don't know how much is out there in schools these days, but the fact that, you'd rather be in a room full of plants than a room full of people if you know what's going on, because then you're getting oxygen from the plants, whereas you're getting carbon dioxide from the people. So that sort of thing. That's one. I'm a little concerned. I'm optimistic that this was an off year and that we're not this far into the climate change, that there are people that were telling, there was a national orchid group wanting to come, and some people are telling them that everything was so dry and hot this year. And I'm hoping that this was just an off year and that next year the orchids and the heat will be, it's still going to be hot, but it won't be 105 5 days in a row, things like that. So I'm optimistic that next year, but we never know. I don't know which way we're going now, but I'm optimistic that next year we'll get more rainfall. We'll be, back to normal, so to speak, as far as that's concerned. But so that's one. But as far as plants concerned, just encourage people to grow plants and focus on the natives, get them growing, even if you have the smallest area. If you can get, even if you have to grow in pots, you have so much more benefit from the plant than you would from another person. Yeah. Not anything you're going to, all of y'all, but the carbon dioxide that comes out. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We're going to go Wendy, Randy, then Jennifer. So Wendy, if you wanted to, you have another question?
I didn't just yet.
Okay. And then Randy Krause, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. My question is, when you have, Dr. Allen, when you have rehabilitated those prairies and reseeded them with prairie grasses, have you seen other life move in that, like birds, prairie species like bobolinks and scissor-tailed flycatchers and things like that, move into those prairie areas that you guys have rehabilitated? And that would also include insects and other. Go ahead.
Yeah, the smaller, the 10-acre one is pretty tough, it's also inside the city limits. But that 300-acre ones, we did see quite an increase in birds. There have been some people doing work out there with the birds, and I'm pretty know the soils would improve tremendously. But with the size like that, but hopefully, if you do have the smaller ones and you have enough of the smaller ones, you'll have that block, and maybe you will get the birds. But for sure, the insects not as needing as much territory, but they're tremendous. I don't know if anyone, there were people doing a little bit of insect inventory on the 10 acres in Eunice. I don't know if it's been continued. I haven't heard of any of that, but those things would be tremendous on the smaller ones, but the bigger one's going to take a lot for the birds, some of the birds, to get more territory. But I'm pretty sure they would use it. The birds would use it in between from one area to another with that. But that 300-acre one is going to be a great thing out there. Now I understand some more coming in other places for the prairie restoration. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a little bit further question then. So if you have a restored prairie that is large enough that it does attract some birds like that, might they bring in some additional plants and cause additional plants to colonize that you didn't plant?
Yeah, we were always surprised by that. In fact, in Eunice, we had an orchid that popped up there that we really have trouble finding. So we either brought it in. We did a lot of transplanting too. So when you're digging up the clumps of soil, Dr. Vedrine and I had two different opinions. He was focusing on one plant and get that. I would just take a 10 by 10, as big as I could shovel. And we always wanted to experiment with something, and that is to see how many different plants were in those clumps of soil we were getting. But he would try to get one individual plant, and we were different. We ended up getting lots of plants moved. And I would just go out there and dig a 10 by 10 inch clump of soil and put it in the truck and then go over and plant it. So I wasn't focusing on trying to get a particular plant. So not only are you getting other seed, but we do, you do. And I think other things move in. A lot of seeds are moved by birds with the seeds on, and other things on the feet and things like that. So you never know what's going to pop up. In fact, I had a question about a butterfly that I mentioned in yesterday or days before. And it's a bordered patch. It's mostly over in South Texas, but there had been one record from Shreveport. So every now and then, animals that can fly do move further than those that can't fly. So yeah, and so it could be quite a bit of increase in numbers of plants out there.
Great question. I'm looking. There's a rodent along these lines. That question. There's a rodent that's only recorded in Louisiana from a very specific place, which has to be the prairie. I'm looking through Dr. Lowry's mammal book. Does anybody happen to know? Does it ring any bells with you, Dr. Allen? It was obscure to me, but I'll find it. There's a rodent species that's only found in Louisiana in a very small.
Yeah, it was in Jefferson. I think it was in Jefferson Davis Parish. Yeah, along in the Prairie. I don't remember what it was, but there was a plant there too, and that was only in that. Yeah, in the Prairie there. Yeah.
Wow, how fascinating. Yeah. Jennifer, I'm going to come right to you. Brett Bates asked, "What is the name of the orchid? Cocoa?" Yeah. The wild cocoa orchid.
Yeah, that's the wild cocoa. That's the one that was popped up in Eunice.
Right.
That we had found it. That is okay. I found several populations here at Fort Polk. We photographed it, but every time I go back to where it is, I can't find it. So it just doesn't come up consistently. Joe Ligio, the orchid guy of Texas, wanted to bring a group over here a couple of years ago, and I said, Joe, for that, I said, I just don't know if I can find it. I just have to get lucky this year where I see it. We had seen one on one of the remnant strips when Malcolm, Dr. Vidry and I, and then it ended up in Eunice. So somehow we either brought it there or got there on its own, but then it disappeared. So, I haven't seen it in a few years, but that wild cocoa orchid is one of the ones that's very unpredictable. Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow, thanks. Jennifer, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, thanks.
Yeah, Dr. Allen, I ask him a lot of questions. I'm very fortunate that he still answers my phone calls when I call just about on a weekly basis. I've given him a little bit of time to heal, but his time's running up because I still have a lot of questions to ask. But a lot of you don't know that I worked with Dr. Allen for 2 years or so, I don't know, in Fort Polk, and he kind of rescued me when my thesis got deserted, and gave me a project and helped me finish. And I learned probably more in 2 years than I learned in my life working with Dr. Allen. So I'm very fortunate to be one of his students and to have him as a mentor. But I do have a question about the wildfires that have happened. Will you be doing any surveys of that, or what do you have to say about that? And then maybe talk about how migration patterns of butterflies and birds have changed, or if you've noticed any changes due to, coastal issues or climate change.
And we were fortunate that we weren't really close, but Dawn, our daughter, was that they had to evacuate almost Eden plants because it was over there by Maryville. So I don't know what's going to be the long range, but I think the national people are much involved in that already over there. There were quite a few people, and DeRidder was full of out of state and other people there for that Maryville fire. I just don't know what's going to happen, and I hope that we don't have that situation again in the future, but especially not repeating again next year. I hope that next year is a typical typical, rainfall, typical temperatures and so forth. Still be hot, but not like that. But I hadn't been involved in the butterfly long enough to know there are a few people that are out there, but it's also very difficult because, things that are mobile are hard to know, because I get weird. People ask me about when I get new butterflies. Most of the time I get a new butterfly or moths or new moth here after a cold front comes through, bringing them from the west and the north. So I used to think that hurricanes would bring them, but unfortunately, when we had that Hurricane Laura, it was 14 days before electricity came back on. People were telling me I should turn my lights on, but I couldn't turn a light on from a generator when I needed the air conditioner. Everybody else that needed the air conditioners, I just couldn't find myself turning a mercury vapor light on to track moths with all the lack of air conditioning. And we had people here that were working in Lake Charles and other areas, staying at our bed and breakfast using our generator to sleep at night with the air conditioner. So I could not. So I don't know, but I do notice that the cold fronts bring me new moths from the west and the north. So, but I don't know much about the patterns yet. But I don't know of any migrating ones like the monarchs. I don't think they migrate. I think they get more blown by the wind than or in some cases migrate or move by themselves. But I don't think that they really and truly migrate, because I guess somebody once said, if you migrate, you have to turn around and go back. If you just move one direction, that's not migration. So I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know, but I'm sure I'll talk to you in a week or two, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be sooner than that. I got a lot of questions. I also have to thank you for all of my my bad humor and jokes that I use as material constantly in my classes. They appreciate all of
That's got to be the most unusual thing. She had a class going on Zoom, and I'm in a rehab, and I have my laptop with me, and I'm talking to her from my bed in a rehab in Baton Rouge, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, to our class. Yeah.
I guess I would also ask, do you have a favorite medicinal plant, or if you can answer that question on camera, and if you have a favorite edible plant?
I think my favorite edible plant is that peppergrass. We do so much with that. We have people come here, we harvest it, and then we make a bread out of it, and the bread spiced with that really wonderful spicy thing from the peppergrass. For that, and I don't know, the medicinal plant that was so important in this area was one called snake root, but it was an aristolochia, which is the plant for the pipevine swallowtail. But people around here would collect it and dry it and ship it to China. So there was a very interesting Vernon Parish aspect of one of the species. It's called Texas. The Texas, what is it? Not the aristolochia, the one you were talking about like a couple of weeks ago, but the aristolochia reticulata, which is over here in the very sandy soil. Yeah. But that one's very interesting because of the historical aspect of it in the area.
Jennifer, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Dr. Allen. I'll call him later.
Jennifer, thank you so much. That was really intriguing. Next, excuse me, Steve Brower, if you wanted to unmute yourself. Steve, as mentioned, is going to be our next presenter for the Louisiana Wilds, and he's a landscaped architect, so I think he had some comments that might be helpful. Steve, if you're there and you want to unmute yourself.
Am I good? Yep.
You're good.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Dr. Allen. I've really enjoyed this.
You're welcome.
I just thought I would add in a couple of comments that kind of relate to your thoughts and some questions. One was in regard to companion plants. I think people in Missouri have done quite a bit of study of that, and I don't know much about it myself, but in doing a little research a while back, I ran into their belief that little blue stem and purple prairie clover were good companion plants. So I kind of assumed that there probably would be a lot of legumes that would be good to match up with other plants. And I think if you kind of search that stuff in Missouri, you probably can find some interesting things. Another thing is that I do some prairie restoration and planning, and you know how you probably all have experienced how many people are kind of skittish about bugs and sticky plants and scratchy plants, and they want to keep their distance from them. But in my work, I've kind of concluded that the best way to get people involved in insects and butterflies and moths and prairie flowers is that you can't stand on the outside edge of a prairie and look in. You got to get people inside the prairie. So a pathway system with a destination where people can sit down in a sort of a cleared out area is a real key to successful use of a native plant area. And that could be true of other types of native areas besides prairie, I think. And another thing and so also because of this aversion to bugs and scratchy plants, a lot of people haven't really been quite up to restoring an acreage, let's say. So what I've done is I've tried to work them into the native plants gradually by planting what I would call a strip prairie. So a strip prairie might be something that would just be, say, 2 feet wide or 10 feet wide, whatever would work for you. And it would parallel a pathway or a road so that people can kind of get to see the plants and the butterflies and insects that come along without having to actually get into it. And then generally after a few years, people decide that they'd kind of like to expand it and get a bigger area. So that's kind of a neat trick to work people into it gradually. And then the last thing that came up as you were talking is that it's sort of like the whole story with companion plants. Doug Ptolemy is a guy from the East that's written a book called Bringing Nature Home. And he's been kind of popular on the Zoom circuit lately. He might be somebody that you can tune into. I think he charges for his Zoom presentations, but once they're out there, I think they're pretty easy to get a hold of. His main thesis is that most birds don't feed their babies seeds or insects with shells. The little baby birds have very delicate throats, and so they feed them caterpillars. So the way that you increase your butterflies and your birds is that you plant the host plants. And so in his presentation, he just rattles off a whole bunch of different host plants for his property. And he says, he didn't have this moth on his property at all. He plants a certain kind of bush or tree, and presto, within a year, he's got those moths. And of course, the birds come as well. So I just thought those might all be subjects you could pursue in the future, or maybe somebody else has some experience with those things. Thanks.
Yeah, I've shared the thing with him before in Texas and Colorway and a couple of other places. He's scheduled for Louisiana sometime. I can't remember where it is, but somewhere in Louisiana. But his biggest thing are the moth caterpillars. Yeah, because that's the one. And then what's so interesting about so many of the moths, though, is that they eat just about any tree. That's a big difference between butterflies and moths that I find, that butterflies often have just 1 or 2 plants like milkweeds for monarchs and things like that. But when I list every morning on my morning list, sometimes there's so many moth plants. I just say, I think it was this morning, there were 35. Anyway, some days I just say there are more than 20 or whatever plant for the moth caterpillars to eat. So there's a difference. So we've talked before about there seems to be more moth species in the north. You would think in the south, but there are more moth species. I think in Delaware is where he is. There are more moth species there than we have, believe it or not. But I think that's because there may be more hardwood trees. That may be a difference there where the pine trees, there aren't many moths that can eat pines. And so where I live, I'm lucky to have 1,044 moth species, but there are a few hardwoods around. But when you got more hardwoods, you're going to have more moths because they tend to eat more of the hardwood tree species leaves. Yeah. But a very interesting fellow. He's been around, but I know first place I think I may have met him was at Cullowhee, North Carolina, when he was giving a talk and I was giving a talk there. But he's the dean of native plants right now.
Wow. Fantastic. Thanks, Steve, so much. We'll look forward to speaking with you in 2 weeks. Steve, did you want to observe anything else? Or?
No, that's all I had. Thanks. I look forward to talking with you in a couple weeks too, Matt.
Great, thanks. And Jennifer Blanchard's put some very helpful information in the chat for us. We're going to go to Randy Krause again, and then Charles Alexander had a question. Randy, go ahead.
Okay, my question is still thinking about these prairies and we were talking about the association or associated plants or companion plants. I'm wondering, has anyone investigated or found any evidence that there are fungi that are associated with these plants, and are these fungi transplanted with the grasses and the other herbaceous plants? And I'm curious if there's some sort of mycorrhizal connection between these things like there is with trees.
Yeah, there are quite a bit. In fact, some people did some work at the Eunice Prairie for that, and I think there was some publications at the North American Prairie Conference from the Eunice site about that. There seemed to be, and that was one of the arguments that we had we were doing better by digging up plants and transplanting. We were getting the mycorrhizae in the soil, that some people that grow them in pots from seeds and so forth. And in fact, when I used to sell seeds, it was I would not clean them very well because I was arguing that there were still spores left on the outside of the seeds, and they may come up better if you didn't have purely clean seeds. And that was my excuse for not working as much. But anyway, I think it may have had some truth in it. There would be mycorrhizal spores still on the seeds, and they would come up. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what made me think of that, was when you talked about how you were transplanting plugs instead of just seeds. And it occurred to me that you're probably getting a whole lot more things that the plants need that maybe we don't even know about when you do that.
I should have pointed out we did both. We would do both. And at the Dural site, we would do seeds and transplant. But yeah. But I think that the transplants are the digging up and moving the plants are the way to go, because you've got the mycorrhizae in the soil. And if you ever get a chance to hear David Lewis, the mushroom guy I was telling you about, he talks a lot about mycorrhizae, and he's just across the border. He's only about an hour from me in Newton, Texas. So, but he'll be at that Nacogdoches thing, given mycorrhizal or fungi talk about the same time I will be talking about sedges and grasses in November.
Wow. And thanks for all the useful comments from from Brett and Jennifer. So look at our chat. This is I'm learning so much. Charles Alexander, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Allen, for your presentation. It's wonderful to learn about your life and celebrate your work. So thank you so much. I live in the Rio Grande Valley, and where I study wild parrots in the urban environment. I just wanted to ask you if you had ever heard of the entomologist Perry Glick.
No, I hadn't. I've only been working with. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, well, 100 years, back in the 1920s, he was flying in World War I airplanes over Louisiana, over Madison Parish, over the Singer Tract, Singer Preserve. He was collecting insects, and he worked the Department of Agriculture. He was helping to eradicate pests But he also wrote a paper, the distribution of insect, spiders, and mites in the air.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he said the air way up high in, where he was collecting was like plankton. There were all of these insects, spiders and mites flying around way up there in the atmosphere. But he was a Louisiana entomologist, and I was looking through a scrapbook at the Gladys Porter Zoo here in Brownsville, where my wife is the curator of birds. And there was a picture of a little man that I recognized from an LSU scrapbook that I found. I found this scrapbook at LSU of Bear Lake and Madison Parish in the 1920s. It was called the Perry Glick Collection. It was photos of the wilderness before a lot of the virgin timber was cut down. And Perry Glick took those pictures, and he ended up in Brownsville working, doing entomology work here, the Department of Agriculture. And I found his grave here in Brownsville, and it's just amazing to me that I knew about him 20 years ago, and then I found him again here in Brownsville. But anyway, I just thought that he was a tremendous collector of insects from a very, very early age. I have clippings of him from the early 1900s. And when he was a kid collecting insects. So he's just a Louisiana entomologist who was incredibly knowledgeable about moths and butterflies. In fact, his enormous collection of butterflies and moths is at the University of Texas at Kingsville.
Oh, well, that might be a presentation in of itself. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, we might run into you down there north of Brownsville. We're heading to Mission, Texas on the 23rd. We stay around Mission and to the west, and we go down toward Brownsville to those Resaca de Palma Park down there. So, and we go see the parrots that are in what's the town we go to? Oh, my daughter left. What McAllen. We go see the parrots in McAllen when we're down there. Yeah.
Well, if you want to see some parrots, just let me know, because I've followed one pair of red-crowned parrots here over 6 nesting seasons, and I know them as individual pairs, and yeah.
Wow.
So
you sound like the red cockaded woodpeckers at Fort Polk.
I've been down. I've done this for 12 years, and this one particular place where I go every day is an old office park where the parrots are nesting in a bank, holes in the bank.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. I'll make sure y'all are in touch. Thanks, Charles.
I'd love that.
Yeah, thanks. Chris,
Both
did you?
Charleses. Two Charleses.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Chris Gruber, you had a quick question, and thanks for all your hard work, by the way. Chris, if you want to unmute yourself. Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Sorry about that. I had to be 10% smarter than the equipment I was working with here. But I was going to circle back to a question that was asked about the future of conservation, and Charles's answer that education was the key didn't surprise me at all, because one of the things that I admire the most about him, or you, Charles, is your ability to teach in such an approachable way. You'd think that a person with so many accomplishments would be unrelatable, but Charles has taught me so much, all while making me feel like family. And so I just want to thank you, even though I'm going to see you tomorrow morning, and I'm sure you're going to point at me to pick some weeds out or something, but I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate it. And just everyone else, he promised me that he was going to make me a PhD, but I didn't find out until later that it was in post hole digging. So thanks for that, Charles.
So Chris is a lifesaver for us.
Oh, man.
Christine, yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much
He's
for that
good for
insight.
teaching you hard labor.
Yeah. It's fun though. I enjoy it. And taking pictures of butterflies and all that when he's not looking.
Look, this has been fantastic. Dr. Allen, as I said, this is a first time he's been able to wear jeans instead of hospital clothes. So we don't want to keep pajama pants. We want to keep you too late. We've been over 2 hours. Anybody else want to unmute themselves? Yeah, Joan, did you have another question? Jason? Yeah. Are you coming back?
I'm sorry. No,
no
I
worries.
don't have another question. I just really, really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks so much. I mean, it's been such an honor for us. Other questions, comments?
I have one more.
Sure, go ahead.
Dr. Al, did you say you were going to be in McAllen next month for is it for the Texas Master Naturalist meeting?
No, we go on our own. There's a place you should look up called Oleander Acres. He has a butterfly garden within it. And he has a nursery, but we stay there and we travel to we have 3 places to visit every day because we go way out to Falcon State Park in the western part. But McAllen, everybody there seems to have 2 to 3 nature parks in those small towns there. So we go to all of those. We visit all. And the North American Butterfly Association garden, we spend a whole day there in Mission. So we have a tight schedule and look at all the different places. We've been going for about 10 years down there for that. It's a wonderful place to visit.
Good. Well,
yes.
Thanks, all right. Any other questions? I'm going to be able to sleep better tonight because I did feel the animal of when I was thinking of it. It's the prairie vole. We only have one record of it.
Brett has one. Brett has
Go
one.
ahead, Brett.
Hey, yeah.
Brett
So,
has a question, I think.
so I haven't seen any Plantanthera or what is colloquially known as the yellow fringed orchid. I haven't seen any blooms this season. I haven't talked to anyone who has also seen blooms for that genus. Do you know how the bogs in your region have been for that genus?
I am anxious to get out. I had not been able to walk since June much, and so I know that Platanthera nivea, the snowy orchid, I got reports and pictures of that from June. And we did not do I did go out in May, so I did see the Calipogons. They were up, of course, they hadn't got the drought yet, but nobody that I know of in this area had gone out in the normal mid-August to see if the Ciliaris or the Integra, although my foot doctor, Dr. Harvey, said he looked for the yellow ones that he would normally see in early August when I saw him, and he did not see any. So I don't know. I may be out in the next few days and see if there are any left over that did flower. I know where they should have been or where they would be. So, but I'm optimistic for next year because I know there was a national orchid group wanting to come to Louisiana next year, but because they're worried about the drought and so forth, they may not. They may be somewhere else. But there was the National Wild Orchid Group was planning on coming to Louisiana in 24, but they're getting reports that it's so dry and so hot. But I'm optimistic it's going to be the other way around, that we're going to go back to what I would say would be normal rainfall. Will still be hot, but I hope not 102, 105, and would be the 98, 97 things. I'm hoping for next year, but that I'm optimistic. I don't think it's going to be 2 years in a row. But I don't know, Brett. But nobody over that way in southeast Louisiana has seen any?
Well, I went to survey, which I've been trying to do, and I did go to a known population, in fact, a few, and you would see the leaves, the flower spikes would come up, but the buds would not show. It was just like almost like how's the rain been? It almost like would pretend to like come, but then it would like abort. That's and then I noticed that the tufts of the bogs were just like kale chips.
Yeah, well, we just got to be optimistic that next year is going to be better.
Oh, thanks for that. Randy, did you have a quick question?
Not really a question. I just have a comment for Dr. Allen. I've just realized that he and I are cousins. We share Bridges and Phillips family in St. Helena Parish. So, hey, cousin.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, please don't admit that too much.
No,
we're third
everybody.
cousins to Britney Spears, you know, huh?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, good.
I don't know if we're going to get much better than that. Brett, I'm not sure. Dr. Allen, there was an event you referred to, and Brett asked where and when. Do you remember what that was? The last event you discussed?
The last one.
Oh, the National Orchid Society.
The last what?
Society. The National Orchid Society meeting.
It was in
Pardon, you said
They told me
somebody
where it
was going to
was.
come. You said someone was
Oh,
coming
they
to Louisiana.
contacted me. I think they're headed to Texas because we also run into trouble with the Forest Service. They want 100 people out there where my bogs are on the Forest Service. So I think they're headed to. I talked to the lady yesterday again, and I think they're heading to Nacogdoches, Texas next year, because the Forest Service had problems with 100 people, and which makes sense. 100 people out there would maybe destroy some of the orchids. All of my locations are on Kisatchie.
Yes. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, again, we've kept Dr. Allen almost 2.5 hours. It's great to release you back into the wild. This has been such a great gathering.
It's been fun, but I see a lot. Yeah. Thank you. And thank y'all, everybody, for tuning in. And hi, Ben. How you doing? Ben Martin's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much. We want to keep growing the community. This was just a great start, Dr. Allen. I can't thank you enough. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thank y'all so much.
Unmuted. Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Great.
Good to hear what you guys had to say.
Really awesome. All right. Appreciate y'all. See you soon. Thanks again, Dr. Allen. Good night.